5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. In this morning's news, there was a story with the headline that read 5.0 quake near Oklahoma oil hub causes substantial damage. This was the story. You might have heard it on the news that we carry here at the top and bottom of the hour out of the city of Cushing, Oklahoma. And basically the story tells what the headline has already told you, that there was an earthquake. 3 paragraphs down into the story, it says this: Oklahoma has had thousands of earthquakes in recent years with nearly all traced to the underground injection of wastewater left over from oil and gas production. Sunday's quake was centered 1 mile west of Cushing and about 25 miles south of where a magnitude 4.3 quake forced a shutdown of several wells last week. So, wow. I know. So, when you hear about fracking and everybody's cheering because it'll make a lot of money, and gosh, who doesn't want that? And everybody wants to be independent and on their own. We don't want to depend on somebody else's oil. But when you hear about things like that, and in Florida, I believe our lawmakers made some kind of a ruling regarding fracking, although I don't think we've had any fracking here yet. Mm-hmm. Because it could. I'm not a scientist. I'm just going to say it could, the way I understand it, greatly affect the underwater fresh water supply that we have called the Florida Aquifer.
Yes.
So anyway, it's an important topic, and we've spoken to a lady, an Inuit lady. Was that you say Inuit? Mm-hmm. Up in Barrow, Alaska, and she was basically, she sounded so sad on the phone because she could see things that were changing around her very area. So, do a radio show. We don't study these things, and that's why we invite people who have studied this. Peter Van Tuyn is on the phone. He's an environmental attorney based in Anchorage. Oh, he's up in Alaska, so he might know what we're talking about up with that lady. Alaska for the Alaska Wilderness League, and he's a writer. He's talking to us about the complications of drilling in the Arctic Ocean and the effects of the local communities. The Alaska Wilderness League. Let's find out about this. Peter Van Tuyn, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Where are you?
Hello from Alaska.
Oh, you're in Alaska now.
I am. I'm in my home office, and it's pitch black outside and about 25 degrees.
Really? You're in one of the states that is one of the most listed on a bucket list. I want to go to Alaska. And we're in the other one. Everybody, I want to go to Florida. I want to go to Alaska.
Yeah.
Florida's pretty good some days in the winter here, but we do love it and wish we could keep that winter going strong with lots of snow.
Yeah, how is it now? What's the temperature right now?
It's about 25 degrees.
Oh.
Like I said, it's pitch black. We'll have about, I bet 7 hours of light today. We're losing light at about 5 minutes a day right now.
Wow.
Up until around.
Wow. Did you grow up there? Is that where you're from originally?
No, I was born in Queens.
In Queens?
But like you said, bucket list, I came here in 1980. But for a couple years in Washington, D.C., never left.
Wow.
Fell in love.
So in the time you've been there, have you seen environmental changes that were man-made?
Very, very significant, or at least that's what, again, my study of the science tells me, and when I listen to the science, is that we have had a dramatically warming Arctic. For anyone who lives in Anchorage, we're a ski community. This is a lot of what defines us, and the last 3 winters have been very bad that way. And so a lot of people who would otherwise not pay too much attention to such things in Anchorage, which is the real population center for Alaska, are nodding their heads now when we talk about climate change. But we're only recognizing here on the Arctic because if you get a change due to climate factors in the lower 48 or other parts of the globe, actually changes about twice that fast in the Arctic. And so they're seeing a much later freeze up of rivers and ice up of the oceans, and they're seeing erosion and permafrost, which is the frozen soil underneath the land in the Arctic that has been perpetually frozen and is now melting for the first time in a long, long time. And so they see these changes in a very intimate way. And as you already mentioned, it's caused some people quite a bit of challenge in their lives.
So the one thing that I've really been clear about is what do the scientists say? do they say that the warming is caused by the drilling? Or is the warming caused because we're using the product of that drilling, in other words, the oil, and burning it? Is what actually causes the warming?
It's the latter. It's the actual combustion of the fossil fuels. And we, as a country, have recently made a commitment to try and keep the warming in the globe at well below 2 degrees centigrade. And this is what's commonly called and to do that in the world and to meet that objective, we're talking about as much as a 5-degree, which is 9 degree Fahrenheit. That's a change in the Arctic. And what that means for the Arctic is really unknown, but it certainly raises significant questions about how people will be able to live there and adapt to live there into the future.
I thought I heard that on this past Friday, a few days ago, that the Paris Climate Accord or agreement became international law. Did that not happen?
It did, and that means that the commitments by enough countries have been made, but that doesn't automatically mean that every country is reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really the next step that puts the walk to the talk, is how are we going to meet that? And in the Arctic, at least, there are many of us that believe it's inappropriate to open up vast new areas of the ocean to oil and gas activities, because primarily if you were to combust the fuel that you might discover there, you're going to blow the carbon budget and make it so that the United States cannot meet the Paris Agreement. That's only one reason. Another reason, I'll tell you, and having been, on an ice-breaking barge in Beaufort Sea where they were testing oil spill response equipment, I can tell you that our technology in that regard is just not keeping up with the ability of the oil industry to access these frontier places. We saw it with Shell. We've seen it actually in the Gulf of Mexico near you folks. The water horizon, right? I mean, if you were to have an oil spill close in waters, you could hardly find one that had more infrastructure nearby with Galveston and all the ports and vessels of opportunity that are in the Gulf of Mexico, and yet they picked up a very, very small amount of that oil, and it got a lot of beaches. We don't have any of that infrastructure in the Arctic.
Gosh.
The one thing I wanted to ask this, and I know it's kind of maybe a little bit in the future, but there's been stories, I'm sure that you've seen them, the Tesla Motor Company taking their battery-powered cars, their electric cars, and fixing them or fastening on them solar battery rechargers, so that in essence they would never need to use any fuel other than whatever those batteries are made out of. I'm just bringing that up. I don't know if you have any comments.
I have my Model 3 on order.
Oh, wow.
Do you really?
Even in Alaska, it's for driving around town. It's got plenty of range, and like you say, if you can put up a solar array, you could charge the whole thing without the need for whatever source of electricity otherwise would.
But wouldn't we still need fossil fuels for some of the bigger things? I don't know. A car is a relatively small engine compared to what they use to for a ship, for example. Across a seafaring ship. I mean, wouldn't we still need fossil fuels?
Absolutely, and no one is suggesting that we phase fossil fuels out from our current reliance to zero tomorrow. It's just unrealistic, and we want to make sure that we have a smooth transition. But we've waited decades longer than we should have in order to have a transition that would be completely seamless. And so we really need to double down now, and we need to invest in those technologies, encourage more companies like Tesla and Chevy and other ones that are looking at electric vehicles. And we need to have a plan, which we do not have in the United States, for getting us from this current heavy reliance on fossil fuels to a future where we can have a clean environment and the high quality of life that we've all come to expect.
And how is this generally affecting each of the towns? Because you have a lot of smaller towns in Alaska. Are they closing down and moving other places, the people?
No, in fact, it's these are villages, largely Alaska Native villages that are very tribally and subsistence oriented. So, a lot of people in the lower 48 might not recognize a village like this, where the real leaders in the community are not the ones that run the Chamber of Commerce, but rather they're the captain of the whaling vessel that goes out to get a whale to help feed the community, or walrus, or seals, or fish, or waterfowl, or caribou on land, or moose. And so these are the leaders, the elders in the community that know how to live in that environment because their ancestors have done so for thousands of years. And they're very resilient people, incredibly tough, and the Arctic is their home. They're not going to want to leave there, just like other folks who don't want to leave where they're living. And so they need to figure out a way, and I think that the United States has an obligation to help them, that they can sustain their lives there well into the future, just like they've had it there in the past.
Your work as an attorney, are you working on behalf of the people, or do you have a specific client that you're working for, or none of the above?
No, you bet. I'm an attorney, and I litigate and I represent Alaska Native tribes and villages, as well as environmental NGOs on the whole slate of natural resource issues in Alaska, including Arctic oil and gas. And I've been working on Arctic oil and gas issues for probably 25 years. And that includes onshore oil and gas as well as offshore oil and gas. And if you might know, just many of your listeners, Shell's recent experience trying to explore for oil in the Chukchi Sea, which is one of our two Arctic oceans.
Did they pull out? I think I remember hearing.
They did pull out. They spent $7 billion, and in the end, they pulled out. And it was a real comedy of errors. If it weren't so serious a subject, it would be a great farce almost to look at it, because of the way that they had equipment that was supposed to be really top-notch, cutting-edge equipment to prevent and respond to oil spills. There was one incident in Seattle where they were testing this particular piece of equipment that goes down on the wellhead on the ocean floor, and as one of the observers noted, it failed, and it breached like a whale and was crushed like a beer can on the surface of the water there, and that was during their testing of it. And
oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah, they lost control of a drill rig going across the Gulf of Alaska in a winter storm. They're probably ill-advised to even attempt that journey, and they ended up destroying their drill rig after they lost control of it, and they're washed up on an island near Kodiak, Alaska. And all that while they're risking the lives of people, just like BP did with the Deepwater Horizon, and they're risking environmental contamination from oil spills.
Peter Van Tine is our guest. Peter, we have a phone call. You ready for phone calls?
Bet.
Okay. Peter Van Tine is our guest again. We're talking about the complications of drilling in the Arctic Ocean. Peter is an environmental attorney in Anchorage. That's where you are right now, Anchorage, right?
That is correct.
All right. And when we get a call, you'll probably have a horrible echo, so I'll try to, caller, when I get your call, I'm going to lower you, but you will be able to have a follow-up. You won't be able to have it like immediately. I'll just have to push the button back up. Thank you for waiting. First of all, good morning. You're on there with Peter Van Tine.
Yes, good morning, sir. There's a lot of sturm and drang about nuclear power, but I'm told there's another technology other than uranium that is quite a bit safer, and that is a thorium-based nuclear reactor. What are your thoughts on this? And I'll hang up.
Okay. Peter?
Well, I love to learn new things. That could be the first time I have heard of that option. We don't have nuclear power plants here in Alaska, so it's not in my experience base to work on them. But a thorium-based nuclear reactor is not something I'd heard of. So maybe I'll have to do some research of my own.
It's a new word for me. Not just a new topic. It's a new word. So all right. So the story we had this morning from Oklahoma, right? Mm-hmm. Was that Oklahoma? The earthquake?
Yeah, that's what you said.
In that particular story, they were saying that the drilling itself, or the fracking, I guess is what it is, was actually causing the earthquakes. But in most of the conversation we've had with you is not about the drilling causing problems, but the product of the drilling. But has there been has anything like collapsed or anything like that up in Alaska or in the Arctic?
Certainly when permafrost melts, you get a subsidence of the soil. And again, that permafrost, that permanently frozen ground, or what should be permanently frozen ground, is thawing over the long run because of the change in our climate up here. And as 99 of 100 scientists will tell you, that warming is caused in large part by the human combustion of greenhouse gases. Mm-hmm. So, that is a direct causation line to subsidence of the earth, and that has caused some villages to either relocate within their borders, move buildings, move infrastructure, or decide, like Shishmaref and others, to actually pick up and move to different in hopes of being able to continue to remain, right where they are. In the fracking end of things, isn't it shocking, to think that we can have the kind of impact on our Earth here that causes earthquakes have been documented in Oklahoma?
Yeah, and
I was recent.
Yeah, and the background in Oklahoma is more stable than Florida is, because basically we're a big sandbar. Mm-hmm. And if you were to shake things up here, I don't know, we might just have a sinkhole that causes the entire landscape to change.
I was recently in New Orleans and was listening to a presentation about the impacts of the gas activities on the area and around New Orleans and south of there toward the Gulf of Mexico. And they said that the long-term removal of oil and gas has actually caused the land to sink. And that, coupled with the canals that the industry have built through the wetlands there, has really changed that environment in very, very fundamental ways, so that you see storm surges having much more devastating impacts on people and the land than before. And I think Katrina is one thing that they pointed to for that, but it certainly won't be the last. We really need to get on top of this. And if we don't do it soon, folks, we are just really telling our kids and our grandkids that they're just in it for themselves. And we've had the real benefits of this incredible age of industrialization that the United States has led the world through in the last 100 years. And that ought to come with an obligation to deal with tough consequences of it, in my view.
And that seems like the whole culture of Alaska and the people are being threatened. I mean, outside of people wanting to go to Alaska as a destination, that's the only thing that the people in Alaska make money from, right? Do they have any other exports?
We have a very large commercial fishing industry because we've got some of the healthiest wild fish stocks in the world. And so that's good. It employs a lot of people, and they're great quality jobs. And as someone who has dabbled in commercial fishing in my life, I can tell you it's a pretty amazing thing to be on the deck of a small boat out in the Aleutian Islands fishing for salmon or halibut, and beneath 9,000-foot volcanoes and in the North Pacific or Bering Sea. It's an incredible thing. We have a lot of opportunity in Alaska. Tourism is another one, and you folks have already mentioned it. In the future, I think more and more people will want to, as the rest of the world loses its wild places, we should be trying to limit that as best we can. But Alaska's got some pretty amazing wild places, and people really, I think, enjoy seeing that. And so our tourism industry has a rosy future, we think. But there are also other things that we can be doing here. And, we have alternative energy resources in many places. And we could be learning how to develop those in the environment of Alaska in a way that could be exported to other places. Microgrid technologies from those villages that we already talked about, they're too far apart to reasonably be connected in an intertie system like that, which spans the lower 48. You need to figure out local solutions. one village in Bristol Bay has a demonstration project that's been going quite well, where they lower a unit into the river near the village, and much like a dam directs water through through a hydro unit to generate electricity. They're just doing this in the river, so they're allowing the flow of the river, the run of the river, to generate their electricity. And they're learning how to do that in a way that won't impact the fish or other activity on the river.
Do you know the story out of where is it, the Dakotas, where they're putting the pipeline through the reservation?
Yes.
That story that's been in the news. The one thing as an outsider looking at that story, the one thing I don't understand is, why don't they just move the pipeline to a different place? Why do they insist on putting it there? And the same thing with what you're talking about. I just went to your website, alaskawild.org. The first thing it says is protect the Arctic refuge. Urge President Obama to keep the refuge off limits to big oil. It seems like a no-brainer. I mean, you're just asking for a simple thing. I don't understand why simple things are so complicated.
Yeah, a refuge ought to have meaning, if you're going to call it that.
Yeah.
And opening it up to industrial activity isn't consistent with my view of what the word refuge should mean.
Yeah, and a reservation, I mean, it's supposed to be, this is their land. You know, I mean, we took pretty much everything else away from them. So this is what we gave you, and we're going to trespass on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you experience this so much in Florida, but and I suspect you do. It's called environmental justice. You see it in industrial, urban areas too, which is that the least wealthy neighborhoods tend to get the most polluting industries nearby, and it's just a question of disempowerment. And
we had that right here in our little town.
We did.
We had that right here in our little town. Yes. Well, thank you for what you're doing. I'm guessing it's not an easy job to be an attorney in your field. I mean, who pays you? You got. I mean, you're just working for nature. It sounds like so.
I the nonprofit part of an environmental law firm I used to run quite seriously, but there are people step up, and we're in it together. So it's been a real privilege to be able to do this work, and plus I get to do it from Anchorage, which is a pretty amazing place.
It's on my bucket list. I want to go. I want to go one day. Peter, thank you for what you're doing. I think hopefully you get commended for what you're doing. It sounds like a really noble cause, and thank you for sharing it with us so we could help you do that. If nothing else, just signing a petition.
Thank you so much for your interest.
And another thing it does too, it gets us talking about, well, we don't want to give up our way of life, so what can we do? And then you have people like the folks at Tesla and the other car, and so, well, here's one idea, and somebody else will come up with something else, and get the young people thinking about these things, and these kids in school, they'll come up with these amazing, brilliant ideas that'll make the world a better place, only because somebody else stood up and said, hey, what we've been doing is not quite is the best way we could do it. We could do it better. So I'm
an optimist. I'm with you. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Let's subsidize renewable energy to the same level that we seem to be doing it with the oil and gas industry. I mean, I'd much rather see the oil and gas subsidies cut out. I think it's an artificial crutch. But boy, if we could do something similar, scale with alternative energy, the world is our oyster.
Yeah. Can you imagine if we started drilling on Mars? Oh my gosh, can you imagine that mess?
Oh gosh, wow.
Spaceships full of oil.
Yeah. Boom.
Who knows what's going to happen? Peter, thank you for being on the air with us today. The website I went to is alaskawild.org. Is that the best website you want to leave the audience with?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, good stuff. We will take a little break, and we'll be right back.